I'm Cassidy Hayes, 34, and I never thought I'd walk into my own house and feel like a stranger. After cutting my London business trip short, I came home to find 88 people partying in my place. My mom, Brenda, was in my kitchen wearing an apron, telling caterers what to do. My brother Leo was serving drinks at my grandpa Arthur's old bar. A family get-together was in full swing, and I knew nothing about it. All this in the house my grandpa left just for me? If you're watching this from a family gathering, I hope yours is more welcoming than mine was. Drop a comment about your family reunion experiences and subscribe to follow what happened after I made the choice that changed everything. I built my career the hard way. While most of my college friends were out having fun, I was coding until 3 a.m., learning skills that would get me a job at tech Solutions. I started as a junior engineer in a tiny office. For 7 years, I worked 80-hour weeks, living on cheap noodles and pure drive. When others complained about tough clients or impossible deadlines, I just focused and found answers. That hard work didn't go unnoticed. By 30, I was leading my own team. By 32, I became the youngest executive director in the company's history. My grandpa Arthur was my biggest supporter. He was an engineer too, old school, building bridges with his hands across the country. He understood hard work and good craftsmanship. When I was 12, he gave me my first computer, and my mom Brenda just rolled her eyes. "She should be outside playing with other kids," she'd say. But Grandpa Arthur would wink at me and say, "Some build with steel, others with code. Both change the world." Every Sunday through high school, I'd visit him at the old Willow Creek house that had been in our family for 3 generations. While my mom and brothers skipped these visits, I'd sit with Grandpa in his study as he taught me about strong structures, math rules, and most importantly, being a good person. "A Hayes never cuts corners," he'd say, pointing to the fancy wood on his old desk. The person who made this desk took pride in their work, even the parts no one would ever see. That's someone you can trust. My brother Leo took a different path. 3 years younger, he always had a natural charm that made people want to give him things. Where I worked for what I got, Leo expected it. He started and quit 4 different college programs. Each time, he convinced our mom that he'd found his true calling. Each new idea needed money to start, which Brenda always gave from her teacher's salary, leaving herself with little. When Grandpa Arthur passed away 2 years ago, his will shocked everyone but me. The family home, a historic Victorian in a now popular part of Maplewood, worth almost $2 million, was left only to me. His note in the will was simple: "To Cassidy, who understands the value of building something to last." My mother was furious. "He must have been confused at the end," she insisted. "That house was meant for the whole family." She expected me to sign it over or at least sell it and split the money with her and Leo. But I couldn't do that. The house wasn't just wood and plaster to me. It was every Sunday afternoon lesson, every proud smile when I shared my achievements, every quiet moment in the library reading books from his collection. I moved in right away, carefully fixing up rooms while keeping their old charm. I turned the library into my home office, but kept Grandpa's books and his old desk. I replanted his garden following his careful notes, bringing back the old roses he'd grown for decades. Even with the tension about the inheritance, I tried to keep a relationship with my mom and brother. I invited them for holiday dinners, which they attended like visitors, not family. I offered to help my brother Leo with his newest business idea, a food truck, by helping with the business plan instead of giving cash, which he said no to. I even offered to help my mother with her house payments, which she accepted but always talked about it like it was a loan I was charging interest on instead of a gift. The London trip was a huge step in my career. tExpectThis had been trying to get global banking systems as a client for years. As our new international accounts director, getting this contract would make my name known and open European markets for our company. After 2 tough meetings, talks, and very little sleep, I got a 3-year contract worth millions. The team wanted to celebrate in London for the weekend, but I missed home. I wanted to celebrate my own way, a quiet evening in my garden with a good glass of wine, thinking about how far I'd come. I booked an early flight, not telling anyone I was coming back 2 days early. It would be my private victory. During the flight home, I looked at photos of my garden on my phone. The spring tulips would be at their best now. I'd planted them in a pattern Grandpa had designed years ago that spelled out "forward" when seen from the upstairs window, his favorite saying. I thought about the bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special moment. This certainly fit. The Uber turned onto my street, and I felt that warm feeling of coming home after a long trip. That feeling lasted exactly 12 seconds until I saw the cars. They were everywhere, parked on both sides of the street, partly on my lawn, blocking my driveway. Loud music thumped through my usually quiet neighborhood. My driver had to stop half a block away. "Looks like some party," he said, as he helped me with my bags. I stood on the sidewalk, staring at my house, trying to understand what I was seeing. Lights blazed from every window. Shadows of people moved inside. Laughter and talk spilled out onto my carefully kept garden where strangers now stood in groups, plastic cups in hand, cigarettes dropping ash onto my flower beds. What was happening? Had my house been taken over? I took a deep breath and wheeled my suitcase up the path to my own front door. A feeling of dread grew with each step. The walk from the street to my front door felt unreal. My garden, which I had spent countless weekends making perfect, was now a trampled mess. The tulips Grandpa and I had planted were crushed under careless feet. Cigarette butts littered the lawn like bad confetti. Someone had moved my hand-carved wooden garden chairs to make a temporary smoking area, and rings from sweating beer bottles now stained the wood. A group of older men I'd never seen before stood near my koi pond, and one was trying to toss coins into it for luck. I wanted to tell him that copper is bad for fish, but I was too shocked to speak. Children chased each other around the yard, one dangerously close to knocking over the stone lantern that my grandfather had brought from Japan in the 1970s. No one stopped me or asked why I was there as I walked up to my own home. Why would they? I was just another face in a sea of strangers. The front door was held open with a potted plant that had been moved from my sunroom. I stepped inside, and the attack on my senses was immediate. The smell hit me first, a mix of different perfumes, cooking smells, and spilled alcohol. The sound was too much. Dozens of conversations happening at once, music playing from my living room sound system, children screaming as they ran up and down my stairs. The air was thick with so many bodies in a space meant for far fewer people. My entryway, usually a calm space with a simple old table and a mirror, was full of purses, jackets, and gift bags. A banner hung across the archway leading to the living room, "Hayes Family Reunion 2025, bringing the generations together." Someone had set up a folding table with name tags and a guest book. I moved through my home in a daze, recognizing distant relatives I hadn't seen in years, mixed with faces completely new to me. My great-aunt Dorothy, who I thought lived in Florida, was sitting in my reading nook with several older women. Cousins I barely remembered from childhood summers were gathered around my dining table, which had been made longer with rented tables to hold what looked like a buffet. I saw my mother in the kitchen wearing an apron and telling two women who seemed to be caterers where to find more serving dishes. Brenda was 62 but looked younger. Her hair was freshly colored and styled, and she wore a dress I'd never seen before with a flower pinned to it. When she turned and saw me, there was no joy in her face, no surprised moment. Instead, she looked annoyed, her smile fading. "Cassidy, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Europe until Sunday." Not "welcome home" or "we missed you," just irritation at my unexpected appearance at my own house. "I live here, Mom," I said, still trying to understand the scene. "What is all this?" "It's the family reunion," she said as if it were obvious. "We've been planning it for months." "Planning what? In my house? Without telling me?" She waved her hand away. We knew you were busy with work. Besides, you're always saying we should use the house more, that it's too big for just you." That wasn't true. I'd never said anything like that. In fact, I'd been clear about my rules for the house, especially after Leo had once shown up with friends for a sudden pool party while I was at work. Before I could answer, my brother appeared carrying a tray of empty glasses. At 31, Leo still had that same boyish charm that had gotten him out of trouble his whole life. He wore a blue shirt with Hayes Family Reunion Host sewn on the pocket. "Oh, you're back early. Surprise!" The afterthought lacked any real excitement. "How did you even get in?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Mom had the spare key you gave her for emergencies," Leah replied with a shrug. "Don't worry, everything's fine. We hired cleaners for tomorrow." I looked around at my home, changed without my knowledge or permission into a place for people who were mostly strangers to me. I noticed scratches on my wood floors from moved furniture. Someone had moved my living room around to make more seating, pushing my grandmother's old desk against the wall where it now had a bunch of wine glasses sitting on it, leaving rings on the 19th century wood. A tall older man came up to me with a curious look. "You look familiar. Are you from Dorothy's side or Richard's side?" "I'm Cassidy Hayes. This is my house," I said plainly. His eyes widened a bit. "Oh, you're Arthur's granddaughter, the one who got the house." The way he said "got the house" made it sound like I'd won a game show prize instead of inheriting my grandfather's home that I'd spent countless hours in throughout my life. "Yes, I own this house," I made clear. "Well, it's nice of you to host everyone. Beautiful place. Should have been divided among the family, though, if you ask me. A lot of people were surprised by Arthur's decision." He walked off before I could answer, leaving me fuming. I moved through the crowd, hearing bits of similar talks. Never see her at family events anyway. Spends all her time working. Doesn't even know half the family. What would she do with all the space? I saw family photos displayed that had been taken from my storage boxes in the attic. Cousins were looking through my grandfather's record collection. Someone had moved my laptop from my office to make space for a dessert table. My private space had been completely invaded. In the dining room, I found a stack of custom t-shirts with Hayes Family Reunion 2025 printed on them, along with a date 3 weeks ago. This wasn't a sudden gathering. This had been planned well in advance, without me. My head was spinning. I needed air. I stepped out onto the back porch only to find it full of teenagers I didn't know scrolling on their phones and complaining about being dragged to a boring family thing. I walked back through the house, past my mother, who was now posing for photos with people introduced as second cousins from Chicago, past Leo, who was mixing drinks and soaking up attention from female relatives, past great-uncle someone and first cousin once removed whoever. No one noticed as I picked up my suitcase, still sitting in the entryway where I'd left it. No one called after me as I walked out the front door. I made it halfway down the block before tears blurred my vision. I pulled out my phone and booked a room at the downtown inn. I couldn't stay and make a scene. I couldn't pretend this was okay. I needed space to think. As the Uber drove away, I looked back at my grandfather's house. My house, glowing with light and life, filled with people who didn't know me, didn't respect me, and apparently didn't miss me when I wasn't included in family events. The betrayal hurt deeply, but it was the disrespect to my grandfather's wishes and my personal space that hurt most of all. I checked into the hotel in a daze, dropped my suitcase by the plane desk, and sat on the edge of the bed. The quiet of the room was a sharp contrast to the chaos I'd just left. I picked up my phone and stared at the screen, wondering who to call, what to do next, and how I'd ever look at my home the same way again. The hotel room felt cold and not personal, but at least it was quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed for nearly an hour, my mind replaying the evening's events like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. This wasn't the first time my mother and brother had ignored my feelings, but it was certainly the most obvious. As the first shock wore off, memories came up from my whole life. a pattern I'd accepted as normal, but now saw clearly. My 8th birthday party, where my mother invited the whole class, but forgot to order a cake I wasn't allergic to. Oh, Cassidy, don't make a fuzz. The other children are enjoying themselves. My high school graduation, where they arrived late and left early for Leo's baseball game. It's the semifinals, Cassidy. You just walk across the stage. We'll see the photos. The biggest one was when I received a special engineering scholarship, and my mother responded by asking if I'd thought about something more girly instead. Meanwhile, Leo's average grades were celebrated, his abandoned hobbies funded, his lack of responsibility framed as finding himself. I called my best friend Maria at midnight, not caring about the late hour. Maria had seen my family's ways for over 20 years and never held back her words about them. What they did, she exclaimed after I explained the situation, in your house? Without even telling you? Oh, hell no, Cassidy. That's beyond disrespectful. Am I overreacting? I asked, suddenly doubting myself as I'd been taught to do. Overreacting? If anything, you're underreacting. They invaded your personal space, used your property without permission, and didn't even invite you to a family event in your own home. That's not normal, Cassidy. That's not okay. Maria's agreement helped confirm what I already knew. This wasn't about a party. This was about a basic lack of respect that had marked my relationship with my mother and brother for decades. I'd set rules they always ignored. I offered peace, which they took for granted. I made excuses for their behavior that they never had to make for themselves. I barely slept that night, my mind going through options. Confront them? They'd make light of it. Ask for an apology? They'd give an empty one to calm me until next time. Try to explain my feelings? They'd make me feel too sensitive. Morning came, and with it, a decision. I returned to my house at 9 a.m., expecting most guests would be gone. I was right about the guests, but wrong about the state of my home. The scene was worse than I imagined. Empty bottles and glasses littered every surface. Food had been ground into my Persian rugs. Someone had been sick in my powder room sink. Rented chairs were stacked messily in my living room. My garden looked like a tornado had hit it. My mother was in the kitchen drinking coffee and looking at her phone. She looked up when I entered. "There you are. Where did you disappear to last night?" So dramatic, Cassidy. No apology. No acknowledgement of the invasion. Just criticism of my reaction. I stayed at a hotel since my bedroom was apparently being used as a coat check room. Oh, that was Leo's idea. We needed the space. You know how these things go. The cleaning crew will be here at noon. That's not the point, Mom. You used my house without asking me. You didn't even tell me about a family reunion, let alone invite me to it. She sighed as if I were being unreasonable. Leo came out of the guest room, hair messy, wearing yesterday's clothes. "Morning," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee. "Great party, right? Everyone loved the house." "Leo, why didn't you tell me about this reunion?" I asked directly. He shrugged. "We needed a big place, and you have all this space. Seemed obvious. What's the big deal? We're family." "The big deal is that this is my home, not a public place. You can't just decide to use it without my permission." "Technically, it's the family home," my mother cut in. "Your grandfather would have wanted everyone to enjoy it." That was the spark that lit the fuse. "Don't you dare tell me what my grandfather would have wanted. He specifically left this house to me because he knew I would respect and care for it." I walked away from them, needing to check the damage throughout the house. What I found sent me from angry to furious. In the study, my grandfather's old mahogany desk, the one he'd shown me as an example of good work and honesty, had a deep scratch across its surface and what looked like a burn mark from a cigarette. Despite my strict no-smoking policy indoors, the desk wasn't just furniture. It was where he'd taught me to draw, where he'd written letters for my college applications, where he'd written his final will. I continued to my home office and found the door ajar, a room I always kept locked. Someone had picked or forced the lock. Inside, drawers were open. Work papers had been moved. My laptop had been moved. The framed first dollar I'd earned freelancing in college had been taken off the wall. The frame was cracked. Upstairs was no better. My bedroom door had been opened, despite the clear, "Private, please keep closed" sign. My closet was ajar, dresser drawers not fully closed. Someone had been in my personal space, touched my things. I returned downstairs to find my mother and brother casually talking about someone named Cousin Frank, who'd apparently been the hit of the party with his karaoke performance. "My office was broken into," I said flatly. "My bedroom was entered. Grandfather's desk is damaged." "Oh, some kids were playing hide and seek," Leo said dismissively, "and that desk thing is probably just a water ring. It'll buff out." "It's a cigarette burn and a knife scratch," I corrected him. "It's a 200-year-old desk." "Always so dramatic about things," my mother sighed. "It's just stuff, Cassidy, just stuff." The words echoed in my head. To them, this house and everything in it was just stuff. Stuff they felt they had a right to use, damage, and ignore because technically we shared DNA. But to me, it was more than stuff. It was my safe place, my history, my private space that had been invaded by the very people who should respect it most. I pulled out my phone and called my friend Maria again. "Can you come over? I need moral support." While waiting for Maria, I walked through each room taking photos of the damage. When she arrived, she gasped at the state of the house. "This is worse than I imagined," she said, hugging me. "What are you going to do?" I looked around at the home I loved, now feeling dirty from disrespect. I don't know yet, but I know I can't keep pretending this is normal. After Maria left, I made another call to David Miller, a real estate agent who had asked me several times about selling the property. The Victorian was in a great spot, and developers had been looking at it since my grandfather's passing. "David, it's Cassidy Hayes. Remember that offer you mentioned last month? Is it still on the table?" My mother and brother, who were in the kitchen discussing which relatives still needed rides to the airport, fell silent when they heard my side of the conversation. For the first time since I'd arrived home, they had my full attention. David arrived at my house within an hour, his usual smooth real estate agent manner softening when he saw the state of the property. "This is not how I remember the house looking during our previous talks," he said politely, eyeing a stain on the entryway wallpaper. "Family gathering," I said curtly. "Let's talk in the garden." We sat at the metal table on my patio, the only area relatively unharmed from the reunion chaos. David opened his folder and got straight to business, which I liked. The cash buyer I mentioned before is still very interested. Mark Johnson, a tech entrepreneur who just moved from California. He's been looking for a historic property in this neighborhood specifically. What's his timeline? He's eager. Currently in a short-term rental and wants to settle quickly. He can close as fast as your side can handle the paperwork. And he understands it's as is. I won't be making repairs or improvements. David nodded. At this price and in this market, he's buying for the location and historical value. He plans to renovate anyway. I took a deep breath. What's his offer? 2.1 million cash, slightly below market value for the fast timeline, but no inspection issues, no financing delays. I nodded slowly, a strange calm settling over me. I want to move forward. David tried to hide his surprise and excitement. "Are you sure about this? This is a big decision. The house has been in your family for generations." "I'm aware of its history. That's precisely why I'm making this decision." I looked toward the kitchen window where I could see my mother and brother talking excitedly, likely guessing about my meeting with David. "How quickly can we draw up the paperwork?" "I can have preliminary documents ready this afternoon. The full contract by end of day. If the buyer agrees to speed up his side, we could potentially close within days rather than weeks." "Perfect. And I'll need the services of a good real estate attorney to ensure everything is properly handled." David made a call, and by 2 p.m., my lawyer Brenda Lee arrived. I'd worked with her before on setting up my will and power of attorney documents. She was thorough and private, exactly what I needed. While David prepared the first papers in my damaged study, Brenda and I spoke privately in the garden. "Are you certain about this, Cassidy? A quick sale often helps the buyer more than the seller. I understand that, Brenda, but my situation has changed and I need to move quickly. The price is fair enough considering the ease of a cash deal and quick closing. She studied my face. This isn't like you. You're usually careful about money decisions. Sometimes clarity comes suddenly. I realized this house has become more of a burden than a blessing. By late afternoon, I had signed preliminary documents and told David to present the offer to Mark Johnson. My mother and brother had been suspiciously quiet, watching from a distance, but not getting in the way. That changed when David left.
What was that about? My mother demanded, entering the garden where I sat reviewing paperwork with Brenda. Business, I replied simply. What kind of business requires a real estate agent at our family home? Her emphasis on our didn't escape me. I introduced Brenda as my attorney, which immediately put my mother on alert. I'm selling the house, I said calmly. The buyer is prepared to close quickly. I'll need you both to remove your belongings by tomorrow evening. The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the explosion. You can't be serious, my mother finally sputtered. This is impulsive and ridiculous even for you. Leo stepped forward. Come on, Cassidy, you're overreacting about the party. We said we're sorry. Neither of you has actually apologized, I pointed out. But this isn't about apologies anymore. This is about recognizing that some boundaries, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. So, you're punishing us by selling our family home? My mother's voice rose with anger. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm making a decision about my property that makes sense for my life moving forward. We won't let you do this, Leo threatened. Grandpa would never have wanted you to sell. Grandpa trusted me to make my own decisions. That's why he left the house to me, not to the family as a whole. My mother switched tactics, her voice softening. Cassidy, honey, you're upset. I understand what we did was thoughtless, but selling your grandfather's house is a decision you'll regret forever. Let's all take some time to cool down. It was the same pattern I'd seen my entire life. Make it seem small, change the subject, then pretend to agree when those tricks failed. Not this time. The decision is made, Mom. I've signed the preliminary documents. Mr. Johnson has already said yes to the offer and is sending the signed contract back tonight. Brenda, bless her, chose that moment to speak up. Mrs. Hayes, the deal is already in process. Your daughter has the legal right to sell her property. I suggest you respect her decision and focus on your arrangements for moving. My mother turned to me, tears filling her eyes. Where are we supposed to go on such short notice? The manipulation was so clear it almost made me laugh. The same place you were living before you decided to move in here without asking. Your apartment, the one I've been helping you pay for. Leo stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. I could fight Grandpa's will, say he was tricked or not in his right mind. Brenda answered before I could. The deadline for fighting the will passed 18 months ago, Mr. Hayes, and I personally checked your grandfather's mental state before he signed his will. It would be a pointless claim. I spent the rest of the evening carefully organizing, packing the items that truly mattered to me. My grandfather's collection of first edition engineering books, family photos from happier times, the small wooden box of letters he'd written me throughout college. I carefully wrapped his pocket watch and the fountain pen he'd used to sign his final will. The desk would have to stay, too damaged now to move safely without professional help, and too painful to look at daily. Perhaps Mark Johnson would fix it, or perhaps it would be replaced by something modern. Either way, I was learning that the memories attached to objects lived on even when the objects themselves changed hands. My mother made several more attempts to change my mind, switching between guilt, anger, and sudden promises to do better in the future. Leo went between threats and bargaining. I remained firm,
feeling a strange sense of peace despite the chaos around me. By midnight, my essential belongings were packed into my car. I'd booked a long-stay hotel until I could find a new place. As I prepared to leave for the night, I took one last walk through the house. Not as a goodbye, but as a release. Each room held memories, but I realized the most important ones would travel with me. My mother stood in the entryway as I headed for the door, her final attempt at manipulation ready. "If you do this, Cassidy, you're tearing apart this family." I turned to her with a sad smile. "Mom, you can't tear apart something that was never truly together." I slept more soundly in the hotel that night than I had in months. The next morning dawned, bright and clear. I arrived at the house by 8 a.m. to find Mark Johnson and his assistant already waiting outside. David made the introductions. Mark was younger than I expected, perhaps early 40s, with a quiet confidence and thoughtful manner. He'd made his money in green technology and was refreshingly direct. "I appreciate the fast process, Miss Hayes. I understand this is a significant property with family history. Please call me Cassidy. And yes, it has history, but it's ready for a new chapter." We walked through the house together. I made no attempt to hide the damage from the reunion. And to his credit, Mark didn't flinch or try to change the price based on the condition. "The structure is magnificent," he commented, looking at the original crown molding in the living room. "You can't build this kind of character anymore." In my grandfather's study, he paused at the damaged desk. "This is a shame. American Empire period." "Yes, from around 1830, my grandfather loved it. I know a restoration expert who specializes in old furniture. If you're not taking it with you, I'd like to have it properly repaired." That small gesture of respect for the house's history meant more than he could know. The walkthrough complete, we gathered in the dining room where Brenda had set up the closing documents. The process was surprisingly simple for such a big deal. Signatures, initials, more signatures. David beamed throughout, mentally counting his commission. As we were reviewing the final documents, the front door burst open. My brother Leo stormed in, followed by my mother. "Stop! This is a mistake," Leo shouted, his face red with anger or perhaps alcohol. Mark and his assistant exchanged alarmed glances. Brenda stepped forward, always professional. "Mr. Hayes, this is a private real estate closing. If you're not part of the deal, I must ask you to leave." My mother pushed past Brenda, speaking directly to Mark. "This house has been in our family for generations. My daughter is making an emotional decision she'll regret. Surely, as a businessman, you understand the importance of careful thought." Mark looked uncomfortable, but stood his ground. "Mrs. Hayes, I respect family bonds deeply, but I've entered into a legal contract with Cassidy, who I understand is the sole owner of this property." Leo moved closer, desperation in his eyes. "Cassidy, please, we can work this out. We'll respect your space. No more surprise parties. You can have whatever rules you want." For a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. These were the promises I'd wanted to hear yesterday, last week, last year. But I knew they were empty, offered only when something was being taken away, not out of true respect for my boundaries. "It's too late, Leo. The decision is made." My mother played her final card. "If you do this, you're destroying your grandfather's legacy. Is that what you want?" I set down my pen and turned to face her fully. "Grandpa's legacy isn't this house, Mom. It's the values he lived by and taught me. Honesty, respect, self-reliance. He left me this house because he trusted my judgment. I'm using that judgment now." "By throwing away your family," she countered, tears streaming down her face. "No. By recognizing that family is supposed to support and respect each other, not use and ignore each other. You've had countless chances to treat me as a valued family member. Instead, you've treated me as an inconvenience at best, a resource to use at worst." Leo stepped forward, his tone threatening. "If you do this, don't expect us to be there when you realize what a mistake you've made." I looked at my brother, the boy I'd helped with homework, the teenager whose bail I'd paid, the adult whose business ventures I'd funded. I felt a deep sadness, but also a strange relief. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Brenda, always practical, interrupted the family drama. If we could continue with the closing, Mr. Johnson has a tight schedule. My mother made one last emotional plea, promising that things would be different, that she understood now how I felt, that we could start fresh. But her words sounded hollow against the backdrop of decades of similar promises, all broken. I signed the final documents. Mark Johnson handed over a cashier's check for the down payment, with the rest to be wired when the deed was recorded. We shook hands, and just like that, the house that had been in my family for 3 generations belonged to someone else. The moment was not dramatic. No thunderclap, no emotional music, just the rustle of papers being gathered and the quiet click of briefcases closing. Mark approached me after the formalities were complete. I want you to know I'll honor the history of this home. It won't be torn down or completely changed. Thank you. That means a lot. I handed him a set of keys, the same keys my grandfather had given me 2 years earlier. There's a hidden spot in the library behind the third bookshelf from the left. My grandfather kept historical documents about the house there. You might find them interesting. He accepted the keys with a respectful nod. You're welcome to visit if you ever want to. That's kind, but I don't think I will. Some chapters need to stay closed. My mother and brother watched in stunned silence as I gathered my belongings. There were no goodbye hugs, no wishes for good luck in my new life, just the heavy weight of choices made and consequences accepted. As I walked down the front path for the last time, I felt lighter with each step. The garden that had once brought me joy now reminded me only of disrespect. The walls that had witnessed my grandfather's lessons now echoed with the sounds of a party I hadn't been invited to. I placed the last box in my car and looked back one final time. My mother stood in the doorway, her face unreadable. My brother was nowhere to be seen. I raised my hand in a small wave, then got in my car and drove away from the house, the check for $2.1 million in my purse, and an uncertain but free future ahead of me. The first week after selling the house passed in a blur of practical things. I moved from the long-stay hotel to a furnished apartment with a 6-month lease, giving myself time to decide where I wanted to live permanently. I opened a new investment account for most of the money, set aside funds for taxes, and tried to get used to my new life. The silence from my family was expected and unsettling. No calls, no texts, not even angry voicemails. It was as if I'd stopped existing in their world the moment I signed those closing documents. Part of me was relieved to avoid the drama, but another part ached for the family I wished I had, one that would have known the pain they caused and truly wanted to make up. That silence broke on day 9 when my social media accounts suddenly filled with messages from extended family members, cousins I barely knew, great aunts I hadn't seen in years, all saying how shocked and disappointed they were in my selfish decision to rob the family of its heritage. The stories they'd been told were, as expected, one-sided. According to the family gossip, I'd thrown a tantrum over a harmless family gathering and suddenly sold our shared heritage out of spite. No mention of the uninvited use of my home, the damage to irreplaceable items, or the years of disrespect that had led to my breaking point. I didn't bother answering most messages, but I did answer my cousin Lily, who had always been kind to me. Her message was more balanced than the others, genuinely asking if I was okay. "I'm doing fine," I wrote back. "There's more to the story than you've probably heard, but I'm at peace with my decision. I hope you and your family are well." Her response surprised me. "I figured there was more to it. Your mom and Leo have always had a different version of reality. For what it's worth, I think Grandpa Arthur would understand. He never let anyone walk over him either." That small validation from someone who had known my grandfather meant more than she could realize. At work, I threw myself into the success of the Global Banking Systems project. My team noticed my renewed focus and energy. Maria observed during our weekly lunch that I seemed lighter somehow, despite everything. "I feel lighter.
I didn't realize how much emotional weight that house carried. Not just the big memories of Grandpa, but the constant struggle with Mom and Leo. Now, when I come home, it's just my space. No history, no expectations, no disappointment. Have you heard from them at all? Maria asked. Not directly. I've heard through the family rumor mill that they had to move back to Mom's apartment. Apparently, they'd started moving things into the house, assuming they could stay indefinitely. Maria shook her head, snorting. The audacity! What did they think would happen? They thought I'd continue tolerating whatever they dished out, like I always have.
2 weeks after the sale, I received an email from Mark Johnson with photos of the restoration work beginning on my grandfather's desk. The craftsman believes he can repair the damage completely, he wrote. When it's finished, would you like to have it? It seems to hold special meaning for you. His unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. I declined the offer. The desk belonged with the house, but his recognition of its importance was healing in a way I hadn't expected. That same evening, I was cooking dinner in my new apartment when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw my mother standing in the hallway. Her appearance was messy in a way I'd never seen before. Her normally perfect hair was unstyled, her clothes wrinkled. She'd been crying. My first instinct was not to answer, to protect the peace I'd been building. But something, perhaps my grandfather's voice in my head reminding me about integrity, made me open the door. "Mom," I said simply, neither inviting her in nor sending her away. "Cassidy." Her voice cracked on my name. "Can I please come in? Just to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered carefully, as if expecting to be thrown out at any moment. My apartment was small compared to the Victorian. A simple 2-bedroom with standard fixtures. Nothing special, but mine. Completely mine. "It's nice," she offered, looking around. "Cozy." "What do you want, Mom?" I asked, too tired for small talk. She sank onto my couch, suddenly looking every one of her 62 years. "We've been evicted from my apartment. The landlord found out Leo was living there when the lease specifically said no extra people. Of course, she hadn't come to make up, but to ask for help, most likely money." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Where are you staying now?" "A motel, temporarily. It's not ideal. Leo was looking for work, but you know how that goes." I didn't know. My brother's work history was a series of excited starts and sudden quits. "What about your savings?" I asked, though I guessed the answer. "Used for the reunion," she admitted, not meeting my eyes, "and some for Leo's latest business idea, a specialty coffee shop." The location fell through. The admission hung in the air between us. My mother had spent her savings on a party I wasn't invited to and another of my brother's failed ventures. "How much do you need?" I asked, cutting to the chase. She looked up, hope flashing across her face. "Just enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on a new place. $3,000? Maybe $4? I'll pay you back, of course." The familiar pattern showed itself. Her crisis, my money, promises of repayment that would never happen. For a moment, I thought about it. It would be easier than the other choice. I had the money. But then I thought about what my grandfather would say about enabling versus helping. "I can't give you money, Mom." Her face fell. "Cassidy, we're about to be homeless. After everything I've done for you?" "I'm not saying I won't help. I'm saying I won't give you money. There's a difference." She looked confused. "What difference?" "I won't enable the same patterns that got us here, but I will help you find resources, affordable housing options, job counseling for Leo, maybe even financial planning services. We don't need counseling or services. We need a place to live." "You need both," I said firmly. "And if you're willing to accept the help I'm offering, help that might actually change things, then I'm here for you. But I won't just write a check that delays the next crisis." She stood up, anger replacing desperation. "So this is your revenge, making us jump through hoops when you're sitting on millions?" This isn't revenge, Mom. It's boundaries. Something I should have set long ago. Boundaries, she scoffed. Is that what your therapist calls abandoning your family when they need you? I took a deep breath. Yes, I am seeing a therapist. Because healthy people seek help when they need it. That's what I'm offering you. Real help, not a temporary fix. She gathered her purse, heading for the door. Keep your help and your judgments. We'll manage without you, like we always have. The irony of her statement, when she'd shown up specifically because they couldn't manage without me, was not lost on either of us. As she reached for the doorknob, I said quietly, "The offer stands. Mom, when you're ready for real change, call me." She paused, her back to me, shoulders stiff. For a moment, I thought she might turn around, might see the opportunity being presented. Instead, she opened the door and left without another word. I sat alone in my new apartment. The dinner I'd been preparing was now cold on the stove. The encounter had been painful but clear. For the first time, I'd offered help with conditions. Conditions designed to create actual change rather than keep things the same. It wasn't what she wanted, but perhaps what she needed. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria checking in. "You okay?" I thought carefully about the question before responding, "Getting there, one day at a time." And surprisingly, it was true. 6 months passed quickly. Spring turned to summer, summer to fall. My temporary apartment gave way to a cozy townhouse in a quieter neighborhood with a small but private garden where I planted tulips in memory of my grandfather. My career continued to grow. The Global Banking Systems project led to a promotion and more international responsibilities. The most important changes, however, were inside me. Weekly therapy sessions helped me see patterns I thought were normal my whole life and develop healthier ways to deal with conflict. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary, that helping others didn't have to mean hurting myself. After our confrontation in my apartment, my mother and I didn't speak for nearly 3 months. I heard through Lily that she and Leo had found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Leo had taken a job at a local hardware store, not his dream position, but steady work for the first time in years. When my mother finally called, her tone was different, less demanding, more hesitant. "Cassidy, it's me. I was wondering if we could meet somewhere, just to talk." We arranged to meet at a neutral place, a coffee shop, halfway between our homes. I arrived early, choosing a table by the window where I could see her approach. She looked older, more subdued, but there was a quiet strength in her that I hadn't seen before. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down, hands wrapped around her cup for warmth. "About what?" I asked, cautious but open. "About everything. The house, the reunion, the way I've treated you." She took a deep breath. "I wasn't fair to you, Cassidy. Not just with the party, but for years. I favored Leo. I took you for granted. I was upset by your success instead of celebrating it." Her admission stunned me. Never in my life had I heard my mother admit any wrongdoing, let alone a pattern of behavior. "What brought this on?" I asked. "Reality," she said with a sad smile. "When you have nothing, you start to see things clearly. And I had a good teacher in that department." "What do you mean?" "Your grandfather. After you sold the house, I was so angry. I went to visit his grave too. I don't know, complained to him about you." She shook her head at the memory. "While I was there, I remembered something he always said to me when I was young. Brenda, life doesn't owe you anything. It's what you build with your own 2 hands that matters." She looked up at me, eyes glistening. "I realized I stopped building long ago. I just expected things to be given to me, by your father, by my parents, by you. That's not the example I should have set for my children." The conversation wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, old patterns threatening to come back, but there was also honesty that had been missing from our relationship for decades. "I can't change the past," she said as we prepared to leave, "but I'd like to try for a better future, if you're willing." I didn't make promises I couldn't keep. "I'm open to trying, Mom." one step at a time. Rebuilding trust is a slow process. We started with monthly dinners, just the two of us at first, eventually including Leo when he showed his own willingness to change. Our first holiday meal together was at a restaurant, neutral ground that didn't carry the weight of past conflicts. My relationship with my brother grew more slowly. His resentment was deeper, his sense of entitlement more set. But necessity had forced changes neither of us could have predicted. The hardware store job led to an interest in home repair. By the following spring, he had earned his contractor's license and started a small handyman business. He told me during a rare moment of openness, "I like fixing things. There's something satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again." I didn't point out the metaphor, he'd find it in his own time. Not all family relationships could be saved. Some relatives chose to keep their story of me as the selfish villain who destroyed the family legacy. I learned to accept their view, understanding that I couldn't control how others saw my choices. Instead, I focused on building my chosen family, friends who respected my boundaries, colleagues who valued my contributions, neighbors who became close. Maria remained my steady supporter, and I expanded my circle to include people who brought good things into my life. 6 months turned into a year. I received an unexpected email from Mark Johnson with photos of the completed house restoration. He kept the historical character while updating the inside. My grandfather's desk held a place of honor in the study, fully restored. The garden had been replanted according to old designs, including a tulip pattern that spelled forward when seen from above. "Your grandfather's legacy lives on," he wrote, "different but honored." His words captured perfectly what I'd been trying to say about my own journey. My connection to my grandfather wasn't held in wood and plaster, but in the values he taught me: honesty, self-respect, the courage to build something lasting. The house was a symbol, important, but ultimately just a container. The true inheritance was the strength to make difficult choices, to value myself enough to set boundaries, to recognize when letting go was the bravest option. On the anniversary of selling the house, I invited my mother and brother to dinner at my townhouse, the first time they'd visited my new home. The conversation was sometimes awkward, old habits occasionally appearing, but there was also laughter, genuine interest in each other's lives, and a shaky start for something healthier than what we'd had before. As they prepared to leave, my mother paused in a doorway. "You know, I think your grandfather would be proud of you for selling his house, for having the courage to make hard choices. Arthur never took the easy path either." Her words were the final piece of validation I hadn't realized I was still seeking. Later that evening, I sat in my small garden surrounded by blooming tulips, thinking about the journey of the past year. I'd lost a house, but gained clarity. I'd enforced boundaries, but created space for true connection. I honored my grandfather's legacy, not by holding on to a physical building, but by living by the principles he lived by. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but neither was it burdened by the weight of toxic patterns and unmet expectations. Each day brought new chances to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. Some days were harder than others, but even the difficult moments felt honest in a way my previous life hadn't. I often think about that moment of decision, standing in my damaged home, surrounded by the aftermath of disrespect, choosing to let go rather than continue the cycle. It wasn't an easy choice, but it was the right one for me. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is release what no longer serves us, even when that something is wrapped in the comfortable cloak of family tradition. If you're watching this and struggling with similar decisions, remember that boundaries aren't walls designed to keep others out. They're guidelines that teach others how to respectfully remain in your life. Your worth isn't determined by how much you're willing to tolerate, but how much you're willing to respect yourself. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision for your own well-being that others didn't understand? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. And if this resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button so others can find this message too. Remember, family is important, but so are you. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to write your own, whatever that looks like for you.